Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Comic Monitors. This is Matt Invictus. I'm here with Darnell Henriquez and Steve, also known as Comics Perch. Today we're going to be talking about the comics industry, comic shops, a lot of the problems the industry is facing, hopefully find some solutions. Steve is an interesting guest. He's actual comic shop owner. Do you want to take just a minute to kind of shill for yourself, promote yourself a bit?
Sure. I thanks for having me on. And yeah, I've run comic shops on and off for several years now, and I've taken breaks in between. It's not ever been a full-time job, or it's rarely been a full-time job. I usually have something else supplementing it, or a partner, and work up here in the Seattle Tacoma area. So nice, healthy area for comics. I mean, all things considered, our location is doing a lot better than most. And we have a couple of projects coming out relatively soon that I'm hoping to talk about. Not really as a shill, just some additional ways that we can reach out and get customers who are not in the local area, and we can help them out a little bit better. So looking forward to that, and I'll hype that as soon as we can get it done. It's about a month overdue.
That sounds great. First couple questions are mostly for you, Steve, since you're the most familiar with comic stores. What books tends to sell the best? And by that, I don't necessarily mean what characters sell the best, but I mean what genres, what types of stories, what should
or writers, so on and so on. Like, what are the characteristics?
What does a new comic need to do in order to fly off the shelves nowadays?
That's a good question. It's, there's always standard sellers. Batman, of course, has been selling consistently well for several years now. I think there are a couple creators who can draw people in, although it's not like it was 10 years ago, where you did have a Jim Lee could move a book, and today he still can if his name is attached to something. He's actually working on the title, but it's not as strong as it used to be. Again, 10 years ago, a relaunch or a #1 or something like that used to do well. It doesn't as much anymore. I think the audience is a little bit more discernible about what they're going to come in and want to pick up. So, the biggest factor there is if there's some level of buzz or hype or marketing beforehand that feels, for lack of a better word, organic. It's not a USA Today article. It's a feeling like something important is going to happen and you have to pick up the title. Action Comics 1000 obviously hit that mark, even though the comic itself was largely a bunch of clips. It had the feeling that if you didn't go in, you didn't buy it, you'd miss out. Either as a collector or as a fan, you'd miss on an important moment.
Like on the phenomena, you mean to say like this is a cultural phenomenon for everyone. Let's all celebrate the fact that we finally reached.
Exactly, and if you go back further in time, I posted this a few weeks ago. The Death of Captain America issue was several years old now, but that was one for Marvel where it got mainstream buzz, it got fan buzz, and even if people didn't like Captain America or weren't really a fan of the storyline and stuff coming out of Civil War, it drew people in because people felt they just can't miss it. And that's more than anything else, that's the biggest dynamic of what brings people in and what moves titles, is this feeling like the book is a can't miss title. So it's on a much smaller scale. It's what Donnie was able to do with Thanos, and obviously the movie helps a bit, but it's more the sense that here's a writer coming in, we don't really know who he is. A lot of the fans didn't, but he was going to do something big, and they couldn't miss it. So that's the best surefire way to move titles. If you can see the kind of the marketing, the hype that's going into an event, and it's surpassing just a news article into a pop culture phenomenon, then absolutely it moves.
Yeah, do you think the Batman and Catwoman wedding issue is going to be an enormous hit?
It will, yeah, for sure. And we're already seeing it. The issues lead up to it. People are getting interested. It's questions you get in the shop, like, what very rarely are people interested in variants, but so when they start to come in, they ask about variants. That's how they're looking for any additional angle into that pop culture moment. The reserves on that title are insane, higher than Action Comics 1000.
And do you think there are any other? Were you saying something right now?
No, I was just saying, like, wow, really? Because Action Comics 1000, like, the variants so huge.
It did, and it did, and it was an awesome seller. But the wedding is going to be huge.
I mean,
it'll be bigger.
Just for the audience to know, they literally sold a blank cover that you could draw in yourself, and that sold.
Sure. Yeah, no, the blank covers sell. You know, weirdly enough, many, of course, they've done blank cover variants before with a lot of other titles, and those move better than some of the variants in a lot of cases. And I always think that's kind of embarrassing for some of those artists, but no, they move. And Action Comics did really well, and the wedding issue is going to do just phenomenally well.
Mm-hmm. And how would you say corporate tactics affect your ability to sell comics in stores? For example, shipping massive amounts of #1 issues, like something Marvel's come under fire recently for. So how would you say corporate management, not so much the titles itself, the contents of the titles, but how they're shipped to stores and how they're promoted, how do you say the companies themselves affect your ability to sell comics?
You know, I think that those moves definitely impact. I think I'll give you a different answer than I think a lot. I've talked to a lot of other peers in the place and people even in the local area. A lot of people are really hacked off about overships. It doesn't impact me as much. The volume is small. But what does happen when there's a corporate approach of really, you know, kind of the incentive programs and some of the other things that go on, it has a tendency of killing off the speculator market. Not that any of us want to live on it, but if the word gets out so clearly that these #1 issues, the collector item is being devalued in some way because they're producing a hell out of it, or there's just too many variant covers. There's a sense that you chip away at that market. And then that kind of has a ripple effect down the line where suddenly the title doesn't feel as special, and then it almost plugs into what I mentioned earlier, which is, you know, if you make it too common, you make this book just feel too common, then it hurts all the way down the line. And so that's where some of the marketing that's gone on, and both companies are guilty of it, where they'll just attack it in the wrong way. They'll make the title seem, I don't know, less. Yeah.
Oh, I can actually remember this. You remember the DCU?
Oh, sure, yeah.
DCU. They did Midnighter. So, and they went with the angle of like, here's I think it was like the first gay solo series for this character. Mm-hmm. Nothing at all talking about like the character Midnighter, or saying, hey, if you want a Batman that actually kills, go pick up this book. No, they just went from the gay angle.
Yeah, I think that's an issue too. You know, both companies have done this. Marvel a lot more recently. Is they do the news releases where they're trying to get attention from some of the news outlets. In some cases, they're buying the press. In some cases, they're trying to get the attention there. And if you go with hey, here's first, you know, gay superhero solo title, it will get attention in the press. They'll get picked up, and you'll see articles written about it, and you'll see a lot of praise for it. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the shops, and in fact, it usually doesn't. Because the people who are reading those articles in the mainstream press are, you know, they may be happy, they may be proud that DC's doing this or Marvel's doing this, but they're not proud enough, I guess, to go down to the store and pop down money. The issue, there has to be something more to the issue to sell it. It has to feel special, and very rarely does the PR train do that.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that's been that gimmick's been really overdone. It makes me think. Like a few years ago when they were starting to, like, you know, kind of like play the diversity angle, they were like, oh, we got Miles Morales. He's the Black Spider-Man. Thor's a woman now. Those books did pretty decently at first. It makes me kind of wonder that maybe if those books were released nowadays, that they wouldn't have sold as well because that gimmick's been so oversaturated.
I think that's true. I mean, and definitely kind of back to your original question, I mean, kind of corporate decisions, and Marvel has been a bit more guilty of it, but by the way, taking a step back and you read some of the commentary on Twitter and how other people look at the industry, people tend to kind of overdo, in some cases, some of the problems. The reality is, you know, Thor sold well for me, still sells well for me as a book. But I have, you know, a theory on that, which is, you know, Jason Aaron came in and he had a long game plan that was clear from how he set up his storylines and everything else. And
yes, so that makes sense.
Yeah, as the story rolled out, it didn't suffer. Even though Marvel did the hype, the fans are still coming in, they're reading it like, okay, there's a plan. You know, a better example might be Ms. Marvel, and this is a controversial one, I think, in this area. But if you can remember way back when the character, you know, first launched, there was a bunch of, again, the hype was, you know, Muslim superhero. young girl Muslim superhero, and that was kind of the press people did, and there was a reaction on the internet of like, oh God, no, and even more a bit of a, oh, I'll bet everybody will hate this, and there's kind of this little war went on, and then the title shipped and it came out, and by month 3 or 4, it was selling okay. It was, I think people got over their initial either loving it or hating it based on the Muslim aspect of it, and they're just like, well, okay, they understood what the title was, and it sold and it did all right. And it progressed away, for about a year before they relaunched it, where it was a decent selling title. It was a solid kind of middle seller one in my store. And then Marvel almost went back to want to, do that same PR train again. They want to remind everybody that about what the character was. And then it suffered from the Civil War II crossover. And they tanked the series, which was a shame because it was just kind of plodding along, selling well as it was, and they overdo it. But that's been a case, is these companies, they can't leave well enough alone. They can't do it just once, they have to do it 20 times, and they kill the market.
Yeah, even I remember, because I was actually one of the people that was supporting the Kamala Khan series, because I felt like, oh, this is actually a good series to, like, hey, I'm a young girl that likes comics, blah, 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 blah. Like, you kind of do get this genuine love for Kamala, but then after, the relaunch, it became politics, it's a contact sport. And it's just, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they lost its subtlety. And it was, again, I've said this to somebody who just got flamed a couple of weeks ago, but no, it was a good title. It was, as a in the shop, it sold copies. That's what I like. As a reader, it was something kind of new and different. It wasn't kind of what I like to read, but it was still good. I mean, it
was like, it was kind of like the idea of like, Matt, you know how much I always love I always praise about like Spider-Girl.
Oh yeah, yes, you do.
It's like, if I would imagine, like, I wouldn't have that same love and affection for Kamala that I do for Spider-Girl, but I would be like, hey, Kamala, do you want to, I don't know, help me out with this and I'll train you? Like if I was a mainstream superhero or something like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, a lot of these Marvel books, when they started creating these new legacy characters around 2012, 2013, I didn't like all of them, but most of them had some sort of merit. It's like, I agree with you for the most part about Kamala Khan. It's not one of my favorite books. I would never pick it up for fun, but I could at least respect what they were doing in the early days. And
Sam Wilson's the one that made the most sense.
You mean Sam Alexander?
Sam Wilson. When he originally got Captain America.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
that was another one that was a shame of you, and you looked at it as Rick Remender spent, I want to say, 2 years kind of building to that moment, where if you go back and you look at his run, you see a lot of hints that it was going to go to Sam, and a lot of kind of prepping Sam for that role. Brubaker said at one point that he was laying the groundwork for it long ago in his run. So you had all these kind of this long storyline to get us to this point where Sam was going to step in, and then the moment happened, and it was kind of immediately went off the rails. His first real moment as Captain America was actually in Axis, not in the actual Cap title, just based on timing. And then you had some other crossovers come into the mix, and you had just very, very strange writing of that book.
Oh yeah, and then Nick Spencer came along, and he ruined everything.
Yeah, he absolutely blew. I mean, it's like there was a conscious effort to ignore all the groundwork that had been done. I mean, Sam earned the role, and then they pulled it away. It was just baffling. And those are the kinds of decisions that really screw the stores, because you get the collector market respects continuity, they respect history, they respect all these moments. So if they start to feel like the writers and the editors and the companies are being very casual with the comics they love, they will call it a day. They'll cap their series and move on, and that's the big threat.
I especially even feel that was the same way with Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther. Mm-hmm. Because think about it. Think about what was it back when the whole all different Marvel started, and you had the cover of Our Nation at War, and it's like, oh, Wakanda's in Civil War. This makes the perfect sense. All the fuck up that T'Challa has done up to this point, the nation would be a civil war, and what we get, we get the Midnight Sisters.
Yeah, that was a strange one too, because Coates is. I mean, I've said this before too, and this is another thing I get flamed by. But I mean, he seems like a good writer in the sense that he has depth. He has a big story he's trying to do, but then
he knows how to do structure. He knows how to like you can tell he actually went to writing school.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you compare it to, and I hate beating up on this because people just do it all the time. But Cinegrace's Iceman was just for it was DOA at issue number one. It just that was not going to sell. Very very bizarre character choices. So Coates, on the other hand, you see quality there, but then the choices made for the book are just very very. It's like they said, just focus on world building, forget all about the action, and just it'll be almost a compendium, and then introduce 8,000 supporting characters, but before the market was ready to take it.
Exactly. And it's a testament to like how little Coates Run really clicked with readers. That like the first issue, massive hit. It like a quarter of a million on the 1st issue, but then a couple years later, it's almost like below 30K, like almost bordering on cancellation range. So it's like, and again, yeah, he knows how to create nice looking sentences. Okay, he'd be, I guess, a decent poet or something, but he just doesn't have much of a story to tell.
He is an actual writer.
Yes, I know, but I mean,
he needs an editor.
Yeah,
he needs an editor. I think people came in, they loved that book. It sold really well. But there were comments. I remember on issue 1 of, less action than I was expecting, or just kind of, moved a little slower. And then people generally will wait it out to issue 6. There's that magical feeling that by issue 6, some kind of storyline has come and gone, and it's a trade size of story. And by issue 6, we had people removing it from their polls, and they all kind of say the same thing. It's not like it's a bad book. It's just not for me. And that was the theme of it's just, there's quality there, but it's just not entertaining. It's not something I want to spend $2.99, $3.99 on every month, because it's not going anywhere. Yeah, and really, I also think there's an issue of timing. If World of Wakanda had been more, the characters been a little bit more true to what people saw in the movie, and then the title launched the month the movie came out, probably would have done much better. It would have taken advantage of some extra attention and fleshed out that world. And it's almost like Coates' run started too early and was timed just odd. And then there was enough different about the film, not that the comic should always be about the movie, but when you're trying to get over a new property, it doesn't hurt to latch on to something really successful.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. And last question I have is related to comic stores themselves. What formats do you think are the most viable? And what I mean by that are how do you think the viability of floppy sales compares to trade sales, and even looking at digital and Scholastic Clubs, just out of all the different formats where people can buy or access comics, which ones do you think have the most potential? Which ones do you think have the most pull on the industry? So just what do you think of the different formats?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think they all have their place is a short answer. I think floppies have overpriced themselves a bit. Well, maybe even more than a bit. But there's a world where floppies exist. I think in digital, you're not seeing digital happen for comics like digital happens for music. There's a discomfort to reading a comic on a digital device. It doesn't feel right, which sounds very soft, but it's true. And then there's
having to zoom in order to read either a specific line, or looking at a splash page and I realize it's all crap. I have to fold back now.
Yeah, the success of digital was really overstated, because I remember a few years ago people are like, "Oh, digital is the way of the future. Digital comic sales have increased 400% in the last few years." And guys, 400 times 0 is still 0.
It's true,
and it's a bit more than 0. But I mean, it's very limiting. It has its place, but like you said, everything has its place, but it is very limiting. So it
is, and comic store owners initially were really freaked out about it. DC announced some day and date digital things with the New 52 and that era, and comic store owners were just panicked. I mean, you're going to the events and the organizations, and people are all talking about it. And then 2 years later, people realized they were worrying about nothing. Digital will have a role, but it's not going to be as a one-to-one translation of comics. You look at the web comics that are successful, they're a completely different format than a serialized floppy comic. So, I think comics, like I said, they're a little too expensive, or rather, I guess put it this way, people who come into the shop, there's this continual grumbling of kind of value to dollars, and the sense is they're willing to pay that kind of money, but then the value has to be there. So if the consumer, if the reader who's coming in starts to really feel like the value is off, then then suddenly that price point feels really expensive, and that's where we kind of sit now. Trades are good. I mean, the sales are solid. Scholastic is an interesting. It's just another channel. I think a lot of people compare floppies and trades and Scholastic, but Scholastic's not like the other two. Scholastic is a channel for books, and it's a healthy one. It's a way to get kids early. It does, I think it is why titles like Moon Girl exist in some cases. Is it sells very well there, and it makes complete sense for that audience. It's Moon Girl does a lot better than Squirrel Girl, which both kind of get lumped into the same place where Scholastic's concerned. But that again makes sense. Squirrel Girl is not written as casual students picking up comics for the first time. Moon Girl is, and so it fits that. Scholastic will continue to be what it is. It's a channel to get comics in the hands of kids, and I love it. Again, there's this misconception that comic store owners hate Scholastic. Quite the opposite. These are readers in the making for us. So we want to support that any way we can. We're obviously not in the schools, so go nuts.
Yeah, so I just, for the audience or for whoever's going to be playing this back, do you mind explaining what Scholastic says in more detail?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. What'd you say?
I was saying, just for the audience who might not necessarily know what Scholastic is in the context of comics. What is it? Like, is it a specific brand? Is it a
Gotcha.
paid service?
Yeah, I'm going to now describe it terribly, but it's Scholastic is, for lack of better words, it's a sales channel. It's a distribution model for schools and groups where Scholastic collects and aggregates. They're basically like almost a kind of a sub-publisher in that they take titles from a bunch of different people. They will commission work as well to be part of that catalog, or you could sell into Scholastic. And then they'll do their own marketing for a very targeted audience. In this case, tends to be younger schools. In the elementary world, that's really where they play, and other places too. But I'm really generalizing a lot. But Scholastic is not a competitor. It's not like Scholastic will ever. They don't sell floppies. They don't do monthly, things like that. They're a channel for trades primarily, and other collections, and some original work. And it's finding an audience that we couldn't find as a shop, and certainly the direct market wasn't finding, and so that's more or less what it is. It's maybe that's a bad description. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of money coming from there. I see it used as an excuse sometimes as to why a bunch of titles are supported, but again, now you got to think about Scholastic again. Because of their audience, Scholastic is not going to go overboard with really controversial titles. They're going to tend to sell things that they know are not going to cause them troubles with their market, in which case schools. The one thing Scholastic does not want to do is have a school complain about some really bizarre thing offered through their service. So Scholastic is just, it's getting books in the hands of kids, and in many cases, back to a question a little bit ago, where some of the publishers go wrong is, you look at some of these titles that are being picked up, and there's very little marketing, there's very little effort on the part of the publisher to say, hey, if you like this, there's probably a shop in your town where you can get 5,000 more things just like this. Or, even if they're sending people to Barnes & Noble, anything to, remind people who are getting these books that there's more of a world out there, but there's very little cross-marketing.
Now up to Scholastic, The Punisher in 3D.
Like Garth Ennis. Like Garth Ennis and Mark Miller.
That's right.
We're all 80.
If you love Patsy Walker Hellcat, then you definitely need to get Miller's Ultimates. That's just going to cross right over.
Yeah, but anyway, okay, next question. It's more general, more for both of you guys. Do you guys have any worries about the future of the comics industry, particularly Western comics? Do you think the comics industry is in any real danger at the moment or in the near future?
I feel like there's a brain drain because, like I said, look, I think you can agree with me. Look at the difference between the status of the writers now versus 3 years ago, right after Hickman's or like shortly right before Hickman says, Secret Wars ended. It's like all of these, like, the big writers we know, or not even the big writers, just like the genius writers like Remainder, Hickman, not Johns. Who's the one I always talk about?
Charles
Matt.
Soule.
No, not Charles Soule. He's still there. The other one, he's the one. Son of. When it comes back to me, when it comes back to me, I'll say it. But
Okay.
no, he did not. He did Uncanny X-Force. No, that's Remainder. God damn it.
That's Remainder. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. So I can't remember the third guy, but all these writers have either left, to work on their own indie projects, or just left the industry in general. And I feel like that's gonna end up happening more, and then we're gonna end up getting these replacement writers that necessarily, either don't know what they're doing yet. You view this as like a stepping stone to advance themselves, because it's like, oh, the movies are hot right now, or they're doing it for their own, propaganda reasons.
Yeah, I say yes. I'd say I am definitely worried about future of comics, and like pretty much everyone who knows me probably already guessed my answer. But yeah, I genuinely feel that at the rate they're going, in about 10 years or now, we could be seeing the death, or at least the near death of Western comics. And I'm sure manga will still do fine. I'm sure Japanese comics will still be a thing. And the thing is, I'm sure there will always be comics published by American companies, but the industry as we know it, I genuinely believe could be dead at some point, because I've just seen so much mismanagement. I'm convinced that most of the writers and the editors and the higher ups are very out of touch with their readers or their potential readers. They've missed a lot of opportunities to bring people in. It's just because of all the mismanagement and the distribution system and everything else in comics. I am genuinely concerned about the future of this industry. So
yeah, I think I agree. I mean, the industry is going to change. That's inevitable, and I think for some people that's a good thing. I think you see a lot of comments when people complain on Twitter of saying, hey, if you don't like it, it's just don't buy it. It's not for you. And, the industry isn't. And there's almost I'd say a dislike of comic shops that comes across sometimes with some of the creators. Like it's Blockbuster. It's an old thing that just needs to die. There's this feeling at times you get from creators where they don't even understand why shops still exist. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. I think you had a lot of really high-end creators who spent a decade or more building their path into Marvel or DC, and they perfected their craft. They earned it, and they discovered that frankly, the money wasn't there. The creators are paid very low. The rates are short. So if you're a Remender and you have the option to go off and do your own thing, and you're basically using Image as a distributor and very little else. He runs his own show. He's taking a bit of a risk, but when he moved over there, but not really, because if it didn't pan out and he needed to jump back to Marvel or DC, he could do it. But what he's discovered is he can sell a fraction of what he sold at Marvel, but make a lot more money for himself and hold all the movie rights and everything else. So it's just they're not paying the creators enough to get the high quality, really high end talent. If you're very passionate about comics, you'd be crazy to stay at one of the big two, because you're just taking money out of your own pocket and you're dealing with a bunch of nonsense. You're dealing with an editor that may have a year of experience in comics, and 2 years ago on LinkedIn was working at a Kinko's, and that's not a made up example. You see some of the editors that are currently working there. You go to their LinkedIn profiles and you see their jobs, and you'd be shocked to discover that less than 5 years ago they were flipping burgers. I mean,
and then they're like hiring a bunch of people just from who've had published one or two YA novels, or even hiring randos off the internet. I've seen a handful of editors, not even assistant editors, main editors working in comics. They were like in comics journalism. I mean, hiring people out of comics journalism, that just doesn't sit right with me.
It doesn't work, and it's the results we see now, and it's not. And there are good editors. So people always like to say there are definitely some good editors out there, and there are definitely some good people out there. But by and large, the quality has slipped. I think pretty much all the editors, good and bad, would agree with me when I say that they should be paid more. I mean, it should be a more legit job that earns more, demands more, has a higher quality standard. But if you're Rick Remender, we keep using him, or you're, I mean, any high end, you're Hickman. Do you really want to sit there and, you know, have spent 30 years writing and perfecting comics and have some person telling you, you know, what you can and can't do and kind of adjusting your work? I mean, that, who would want to put up with that? Of course you're going to leave. And that ultimately then hurts comics.
Like within the span of 10 years, over 100 issues.
Yeah. And it creates bizarre decisions. It hurts fans. There's this, you know, I think it was a common topic in my shop, and I know several others, when you have Daken, who's, you know, not the villain everybody loves. I mean, this isn't the like a Magneto level villain everybody, you know, wants to see. And he's showing up in 3 comics in the same month and being written completely different. He's just a kind of mindless villain in one. He's a good guy in another. He's a mercenary in the third. And it's in the same month, happening at the same time. And you look at that and you go, wow, aren't these editors talking to each other? And then you look at the editors like, oh, that's actually the same editor for 2 of those 3 books that are just letting the story just be whatever it is. And that's a problem. And so people kind of, they definitely go off on, you know, something a colorist says on Twitter, and then those opinions and comments are offensive and dumb. But the core problem is just a lack of quality in their line. And that's what worries me when I think about the future of the industry.
Yeah, and do you think these companies, are they in the position to pay people more, because comics industries aren't making huge amounts of money? So do you think that they are genuinely holding back on the creator salaries, or are they doing the best they can?
No, I mean, well, Disney, and I'm not saying that, I mean, Disney's obviously a wealthy company, but Disney notoriously pays cheap. They have for decades with animation and other things. That's just their model, because everybody wants to work for Disney, and now, you know, you want to work for Marvel. And this is just a bad kind of higher up decision, where they have a very profitable, you know, amazing kind of movie studio that's cranking out hits. Avengers, watched that yesterday, a pretty amazing movie, and it's going to make crazy money. But they're building off of a foundation that really owes itself to at least 15 years ago or further back. I mean, the modern era is not being represented in the films. And even with Captain Marvel coming out, no real sign of that anytime soon. It's forging its own path. At some point, you know, Disney and Marvel, for their own survival, needs to put more effort there, or think about that publishing division differently, because they're gonna eventually hit a wall with their source material. So I don't know. I think there's more money to be made there. I think there's more money to be giving their creators. It's a complicated topic for sure.
Okay, and how do you think the distribution system plays into this? Do you think? Yeah,
it's awful.
Yeah, well, everyone agrees it's awful, but I mean, just more specifics of why it's awful.
Yeah, it's you know, Diamond, and it's easy to beat up on Diamond. I do my fair share of it. But part of it's just nobody's stepped up to really improve it, and Diamond's really not in any. I mean, what's their motivation to really change? Unlike kind of comics in general, they are getting slowly squeezed in the middle. So how much money they have to overhaul their infrastructure, I'm not sure. But you know, I think there's certainly a modernization that needs to happen, but there's also just a recognition that, you know, I think this is a personal theory of mine. I have no real facts to back it up other than gut feeling. There was a move in a lot of the ways that Diamond operated and the publishers operated with Diamond and how distribution all took place, that seemed to assume that digital, because they had watched what played out with music on iTunes and other places, that a similar thing was going to happen in comics. So they took almost a defensive position of not really investing in kind of their infrastructure and not investing in the shops and the outlets that were selling books. And instead they took almost a kind of wait and see position because there was an assumption that digital was going to cause a big impact. And here we are now about 10, 15 years later, and very little has changed, but it needs to. You know, pricing has gone up. The movie boom has happened, where there's a lot more attention to comics as pop culture items. But the distributor, Diamond, and publishers and how they interact with it have almost kept things frozen in amber to how they were a decade ago.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've walked in the store into my comic store and they said, "Oh yeah, our last batch of this comic, it arrived and it was too beaten up to be sold, or we didn't get it at all because of diamonds." So
Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
really are holding everything back.
And it's a weird thing to say, but if you go back again 20 years ago, we had these things. I mean, it's nothing has changed. You have a lost order, or you have an order that goes to the wrong shop, or you have a box that comes in, it's been sitting out in the rain seemingly, or just some kind of crazy thing has happened. And the ability to get somebody on the phone and get new copies and do reorders is just it's painful. It is a painful process. But again, there's no real motivation to change. And 20 years ago, it's like, collectors would be irritated by that. It might slow a little bit momentum, but they'd come back the next week and, stuff would happen. But now we've had, 10 years of Marvel movies in particular, and a lot of other comic films. And so you got a lot of people coming into the shop, and you have a lot of attention of people who kind of want to be sold. It's not like every movie viewer is going to start reading comics, but suddenly there's a lot more visibility there. And so if the distribution channel is still where it was 20 years ago and hasn't adapted to an increased interest, then yeah, you're just kind of screwed.
Mhm. Yeah, and do you think part of the problem could be with part of the problem with growing the industry could be with like the location and the quality of comic stores? Because I mean, I like my store fine, but it's in a strip mall, not the best strip mall. It's the kind that has like you'd expect to have like a Kmart and stuff. This is how most of the comic stores I've personally seen are tend to not be in the best parts of town. Some of them don't have the nicest atmosphere. So do you think that if I know more stores got a facelift or moved into better locations, that would have a positive effect on the industry?
Oh, it would. And I mean, my shop's in a strip mall, and I wish it wasn't, but it is. And you got a bunch of problems there. I mean, there's not enough money going back to the shop to where you can go for rent in a nicer area. And when you're doing that, you're committing to 5 years in most cases. It's very hard to go in and there's no such thing as a month by month lease. You have to have a longer term lease. And so if you have some worries about your industry and your core product, and maybe you're selling Funko stuff now or whatever to supplement your income, fine. But you have a hard time predicting where it's going to go. So now, you want to level up your store. You want to put some money into it. You want to kind of put some investment into your location and kind of how the store looks. But, pulling the trigger on that, I mean, a lot of store owners, like I said at the beginning, I have jobs in tech. So that's where I get my money to afford my store. So the months will go by where I operate at a loss because that's just how it is. Most people don't have that luxury. So that's a hard thing. Rent's gone up. The economy, is not in the worst shape. It has gotten better in some cases. And then comics too is a topic I've had with another shop owner. That's a hard business because your inventory is massive. You have, and what do you do with it? Your comics are not the easiest thing to kind of move in, move out. There's not returnability. So, you've got all this physical space that needs to go to just showing and displaying your product. And it's really hard to avoid your store not getting junky fast because you got more stuff to sell than space. And so a lot of comic stores all kind of devolve to that same kind of place of just, books everywhere and long boxes piled up on top of long boxes. And I mean, that's just, it's tough. That is a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah, and another thing is like comics, fairly expensive hobby. I mean, like those
Yeah.
some of those prices are way too high. But the thing is, like these stores, they tend to be in places where like the people who go to these malls, they kind of can't really afford to shop at Target. So it's like I think there's a bit of a disconnect there between like how much the product costs and the income of the areas they're located in. And I'm not trying to like bash people with lower incomes or anything. I'm just saying there's a bit of a disconnect, I think.
Yeah, it's just a reality of the business. I think, and this is where I don't know that it would have worked, but you really would have hoped that, Disney buys Marvel. There's a lot of money. When they want to, they can put some real effort into merchandise. No one has ever accused Disney of not merchandising the hell out of every single thing they've ever done. And DC has, big pockets with Warner. And there's lots of money there. I mean, even Images and Upstart, there's things they can do. And so as the movies came up and as money started flowing in, as pop culture grew, as these cons got bigger and bigger, and you got audiences there, you kind of wanted people to work together for the betterment of the industry, both the shops and the publishers, and say, let's make these shops. I mean, let's look at Starbucks as a model and figure out how we have a clean shop. We help the shop owners. We put some returnability in their hands, and we really pump this moment we're in and try and solidify comics as pop culture for everyone by making it better marketing, easier for the retailers, and let's get these shops out of the Kmart strip mall and into a higher end mall or into a really nice store, and everybody benefits. But that's of course not how it's gone, and that's a little bit of utopian thinking, I think, on my part.
And then there's also the issue of like retail is kind of going down. You got a lot of shopping malls closing. It's like the internet is kind of like bad effect on retail. So it's like I was thinking, all right, moving stores and comic stores and like malls and stuff, that would be a good idea. But then the malls aren't doing so well either. So it's like,
right.
Yeah,
you're right. It's a hard problem. Comics and comic shops in particular are stuck in the middle because our product, what we sell, and our audience, it's not like Blockbuster. It is very hard to order comics, especially on a month-by-month basis off Amazon. Well, they don't offer it, but it's not going to translate well there. So the comic shop, in theory, should be a protected store from a lot of these other businesses. But when the world's kind of crumbling around you, then it all boats sink or rise.
Mm-hmm. And something I wanted to ask is, a lot of people have been bringing up the fact that like a lot of comic stores are closing. I think it was about 50 last year. Do you happen to know like how many opened in the same year? Like what's the rate of like closures versus openings?
More closed last year than opened. I've seen a couple numbers out there. It's a little hard to pinpoint it because so many stores are multi-purpose. They're comic stores and gaming stores, or so it's hard to know where to count. Rough rule of thumb I've seen is about 3 times as many stores closed last year as opened. I think that's probably pretty accurate. I think this year is likely to be worse based on how the year has begun. And there is a correction happening in a lot of. You mentioned earlier, the malls are not doing well. A lot of the shopping centers are not doing well. The property owners, to kind of combat this, have decided the best thing they can do is raise rent, because that's the way to help the industry. So, costs are rising and profits are dropping, and it's just that model is really rough for people. So I think we're in for another year of correction, and then hopefully, we can start to build our way out of it. But it's going to take, it will, at this point, it has to take teamwork from the publishers, the distributors, and the shops. It's going to take the creators doing more to help push. Everybody's got to kind of get up and lift together.
Okay. So is there anything else you want to say about the distribution system or about stores before we move on to something else?
No, I'm sorry. I'm doing all the talking here. I don't mean to just ramble on. I mean, it's a death of a thousand cuts. There's a million little problems. You have store owners desperately just trying to figure out how to make a profit. And so if something takes 3 times as long as it should, for example, if you're in Diamond's ordering system and you're trying to do some reorders because the title has come up and the cutoff dates are not well published, or the form itself goes down. I mean, there's just so many little obstacles to getting to the finish line, and for a lot of shop owners, it's just exhausting. And when it's exhausting for too long, you eventually give up.
Okay, all right, and don't feel bad for talking. There's a reason it's called Chat with a Comic Shop Owner and not. Okay, but moving on. Next thing is do you think a significant amount of comics decisions are not motivated by financial reasons, but instead they're motivated by personal agendas or desires to do vanity projects? Do you think a lot of stuff going on in comics has nothing to do with making money and is in fact more editors or publishers chasing their own personal agendas?
So yes and no. I think it roots back to the idea that we have a lot of people in who are they're very early in their careers. There's not a good mentorship. So they're left out to their own devices, and they don't know necessarily when something's a good or bad decision. I think if you ask the question directly to editors and publishers, of course they would say it loops back to money. And of course they would say it's not about, kind of personal agendas. But if you're if you haven't had a lot of training in the business world, you know, how are you supposed to even know what a good business decision is? And I ask anyone who's listening to this, go to some of the editors, look them up on LinkedIn, look at their past history. A shocking amount of them were doing just random retail jobs 2 or 3 years ago. That's a problem. And then you have other people, like you have Matt Rosenberg, for example, who has a long history and who has done stuff in the industry, so he knows better. But you know, for every one of him, you've got 4 or 5 people around him that just they're new. They don't know what a good decision is in a lot of cases. And
hey kids, you could be a comic book editor tomorrow.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's too quick, and it's one of those things. It's like a virus. It builds a little bit on itself. So people say this like it's some horrible secret, but the reality is nepotism is in every single industry and every single job. You bring somebody in, and that you ask that person to hire other people, and they're going to go out and hire friends, or they're going to hire people like them. It's why you get into any big company like a Microsoft or an Amazon, and they do hiring training specifically to try and stop that. But it's impossible. You're going to hire out of your network, and so in comic, you hire out of your network.
Man, you know what we need to do now.
What do we need to do?
Yeah, I go to Marvel, you go to DC. Let's get hired as editors.
I'd have to delete my entire stuff. I'd have to delete everything I've ever put on the internet in order for that to happen. These people take one look at my Twitter feed, and it's just.
Oh please! You know how much porn I have on my Twitter feed, and I still get hired.
No, I'm not even talking that. I'm like, it's 4 years straight of me bashing these people relentlessly. I don't think that's a good look. But anyway, I think that everyone in the industry wants to make money. No one really sets out with the intention of bombing. I'm sure there's some people who do, but for the most part, no one wants to fail. But it's just, I think a lot of people, they just have inexperience is one thing, but on the other hand, you've got egos. I think a lot of people in the industry are putting out vanity projects. They're like worrying more about, they're just not like I've been like following I pay slightly more attention to DC nowadays than Marvel, and I feel like a lot of stuff like New Age of Heroes and even some of those young adult books they're putting out, it's like, okay, it's not, I do think they want these things to take off. I think they want them to be successful, but there are some problems with the content that I think have more to do with their own personal interests. Because like getting back to like the YA stuff, I think it is like a pretty good idea in concept in order to like I don't know, get more people into comics. But it's just looking at a lot of the people they hired is like people who don't really have any very little experience in comics, or none at all. It sounds like they really wanted to be, I guess, hip with the kids, or they want to be like very trendy. They really want to do the YA thing. I think if you read a lot of the descriptions for these books they're putting out, it's the kind of stuff that like a little kid who wants to get into superhero comics would read this stuff, and they'd be like, well, not little kids, I mean like teenagers and stuff into superheroes. They read this stuff and like they'd be really put off by it. Like, I don't think a lot of kids who are like, you know, walking out of like, you know, Avengers, or who like really like I know, superhero toys or stuff, will want to read like a Harley Quinn book where it's about like gentrification and drag queens and stuff. They just read then like, what the hell is this? So
or my favorite with what was that book that you and I were making fun of? It's the one with Hawkeye and Red Wolf.
Oh yeah.
You want to say Avengers?
No, that was
Occupy Avengers.
Occupy Avengers. And the first line is, superheroes are a privileged class.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to hit a market. I mean, again, it says people are they're trying to make decisions that they think will work. I really don't believe, you know, there's really any big nihilists out there who just want to see everything burn. It is they think they're hitting a market, but they have no real training experience to do so. So they have their bubble. And in their bubble, they're hearing about privileged class. They're hearing all these terms pop up on the internet. They're like, oh, this is the latest, coolest thing. This is what people are talking about. This is how we have our hand on the pulse of the industry. And so they put out these books, and there's no market research. There's no, you know, is this going to land with the audience? There's no knowledge of, you know, we are going after a new audience, but hey, we got to let them know it's here, and how are we going to grow it? And does this audience have money? I mean, there's a million questions to ask. And they just don't know to ask these questions. So I don't think it's, you know, there YouTubers and other will do these videos about, You know, social justice warriors who are trying to infect comics. It's yes and no. It's more that they're undertrained to do what they need to do. And so they're coming out and they're putting these topics in because they legitimately think, hey, this is what people want to read. And they don't know any better. And the comics result is crap. And then it doesn't sell. And then there's some bitterness and ego comes in of, you know, oh, I couldn't have failed because it was a bad idea. I must have failed because of a bunch of angry white people on the internet. And then the cycle continues.
You know what it is? It's how do you do, fellow kids? It's a bunch of people.
Exactly.
They're trying to connect with younger people, but they have just no idea what the younger people are like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, you can go.
No. It's well said. That's absolutely right.
Okay. Since you brought up the subject of social justice, I think I should clarify that yes, I am very much opposed to like the social justice warriors crowd. I've been keeping up with these people for years. I've seen these people say so many horrible things. It's like, I know they're a problem, but yes, there are people out there who are just way too focused on this group. And it's like, they are a problem with comics, but they're not the core problem. They're a symptom of the problem. You got a lot of mismanagement, a lot of very out of touch. It's like most of the publishers and stuff, they're mostly apolitical. They're not that politically motivated. I mean, like, it's the result of mismanagement, letting a lot of people into comics who probably shouldn't have been writing. There are other problems. It's like a good critique of the comics industry. It should focus on some of the political stuff, whether they're like alienating readers, whether they're focusing on unpopular political themes and stuff. But there's more to it than that. It's just saying that like just social justice warriors are killing comics. It's an oversimplification. So
it is. It is. Yeah. I think you got, you know, people forget, like Warren Ellis put out books that sold well and nobody was complaining. And that Warren Ellis is really aggressive social justice in what he does and the message board he used to run and everything else. It's absolutely, those were his topics, but his books sold. So you didn't hear a lot of outrage. You didn't have a lot of people, you know, complaining and stomping their feet or anything else because they moved, and it was easy to ignore them. And also, Ellis didn't go on Twitter and just bash people left and right. He largely kept to himself, more or less. And so,
sorry, yeah. I was going to say, because I actually just remember now the third writer I was doing at the beginning, Matt Fraction.
Yep, yeah, Fraction's a good example. Fraction absolutely is, and by the way, Fraction's another one who. Definitely, you would categorize him and Kelly Sue as very social justice-ish. But when they moved comics, and that was more true of Matt than Kelly Sue. But when they moved comics, I mean, who cares? The comics moved. They went out. Maybe they were good, maybe they were bad. Maybe people didn't read them or not. The problem that's occurred over the last 3 years is that the volume of comics that just aren't selling is increasing. And the politics is increasing because everybody's talking about politics all the time now. And so it's easy to correlate the two. And those social justice topics, a lot of the nasty things that come on, I'm not a fan of either. I think it's ridiculous, but the core problem in comics is something completely different. It's mismanagement, as you said.
Yeah, and it's like DC, it's still run by most of the same people responsible for the New 52. And like New 52, arguably worse than what DC is doing now, not by much, but it is. It's like New 52 was mostly apolitical. I don't think anyone says that the problem with those books and the DC reboot had anything to do with politics. It was just really bad management, egos, subpar creators, just apolitical decisions. Those same people are running DC now. A lot of the same problems persist. There's some annoying political messages or decisions made, political decisions, but for the most part, it's just that we need new people running these companies, I think. So
yeah, definitely at the, I'd say, upper middleman. I don't know, the it's interesting of the people who get regular videos and things made about them. And again, I'm not discounting, I'm not dissing it. Somebody was saying I was beating up on the DNC guy a couple weeks ago. Not at all. It's his channel. He can do whatever he wants. And that's cool. It's just, Mags Visaggio, for example, has very little influence. Tom B, a lot of influence. Which one do you think is causing more of chaos in the industry right now?
thanks for bringing it up. Thanks for bringing it up because that really, really annoys me. It's like yeah, I said I have a problem with the social justice crowd. I have problems with the people opposing them too because they just focus on all these things that don't matter. It's like, okay, Mags has said a couple of things that I think people need to know about that do deserve to be criticized. But at some points, you just got to move on because she's not that influential. She'll probably never be that influential. Dan Didio, like a co-publisher of DC.
Say, when are you gonna start ranting about Dan Didio now?
Dan Didio like has caused a million times more problems than she has, and yet these people who like won't stop talking about like Mags and all these other nobodies, they hardly ever mention Didio. So it's like this is kind of the, I don't want to say this is true of all these people, but there is a kind of an element of fake geekdom there. It's like they're not really, they don't know as much about the comics that they claim to. It's like if these people are going to focus,
they just joined the war to fight an enemy, not to protect.
Yeah. I think you gotta look at the picture a little bit bigger, and and to his credit, and I'll say something very positive about the guy, the Kickstarter, I guess, the Indiegogo. Yeah, Jawbreaker. Good for him. No, I think that's awesome. He has an idea. He's getting some money. He's promoting it. He's using now his audience to promote it, and he's getting attention over it. That's great. More power to him.
Stretch goals to get their audience what they want, like the Ethan Van Sciver cover.
That's good. That's good. I mean, these are good things, and that's a really good sign. More of that. The beating up on people that I'm sure they're nice. Well, who knows if they're nice people or not? Probably not, actually. But Tim Doyle. Who cares? Literally, why? Who cares? This is somebody who has no influence over anything. Yes, he has some friends. Yes, he talks to some people in DMs. Yes, I'm sure they have coffee when people are in Austin. Whatever. But day in, day out, this is not the guy who is causing the publisher to not market things or Diamond to be stuck in their old distribution system. This guy's not going to be responsible one way or another for the decline of the industry. It's going to be people higher up. So put your money where your mouth is. Go for the people who are actually causing issues.
Yeah, it's drama farming. They're just kind of seeking drama, and it's like there are a lot of people at like DC. It's like I don't know, Andy Corey. Like he's an editor, fairly influential. I think people should be criticizing him a bit more. I think people should be talking about like how badly DC treats a lot of their a lot of characters that fans like. The disconnect between fans and editors and publishers that have nothing to do with politics. I won't name names because I've done these subjects to death. But yeah, there is I think a lot of people have a very skewed focus, and I don't want to say all of them are idiots or horrible people or anything because it's complicated. But I think that a lot of the people who want comics to be good should get their priorities straight. Because yeah, again, Tim Doyle is a nobody. He's
an art dealer for all intents and purposes. He deals prints. I mean, it's now. But on the other hand, and this is why I think it continues, is Tim is likely to reply to you, and then the little battle will start up, and then you get a lot of attention and hits, and whereas Tom B will not. He will either just block you or ignore you or whatever. You're not going to get the time of day from him. So if you want to have an ongoing argument, then yeah, you're going to go after targets who actually want to reply back, and that's why these Didio. Does he ever reply to anyone? I don't know.
He doesn't even have Twitter.
No Twitter. So Didio, I mean, it's a target. You're yelling against a brick wall, and at some point, I'm sure it's not going to build you an audience because you're yelling at a brick wall. So it's better to yell at somebody who will yell back to you, and that's why a lot of these targets are targets.
Yeah, and the thing is a lot of people like to talk about how like creators on social media treat their fans like shit, and a lot of the times they do. This is absolutely a problem, but it has improved in recent months. Like not because their behavior has improved, but a lot of people, they've just quit. Like Dan Slott, he's off social media. Nick Spencer, Mark Waid, they have all left social media at the moment. So it's a lot quieter than it used to be. And I think that's a good sign. I think that if these people can't behave themselves on social media, the best thing that they could do is just leave. So I think I wish people
would. Matt, are you saying if you don't know how to live without the suit, you don't deserve to wear it?
Yeah, pretty much. So it's like I wish people would like I don't know, direct more attention on like I don't know, the quality of the books or something, instead of just consistently mining for drama. I think people should acknowledge that we've seen a slight improvement in I guess the social media climates, and start working to improve things and decrease drama. But that's just not what's happening.
No, and it's feeding back on itself. So a couple of months ago now, there was the social media policy that got put out simultaneously, although it didn't get a lot of press. It got a bit, and this is on public record. You can go look at Disney's annual reports and other things. There were statements made to Disney employees, and that's Marvel, that social media, the kind of things that are going on at ESPN, and then to a lesser extent at Marvel, will not be tolerated. And so there was this advice, particularly given to the higher up creators who have more to lose, that are, for lack of a better word, staffers. A lot of them are not, but you know what I mean. They're more known names, and you get the there's strong speculation. A friend of mine swears by it. I've never seen it, so I'm not passing on gossip that Slott and Wade were both tapped and basically given if you want to keep being a big name here, you delete your account. You can't control yourself, and it all happened about the same time. And so this is a win in the sense that if there's going to be a toxic atmosphere to the fans, and people forget Disney almost more than any other company believes in, they say the guest comes first. In this case, the reader comes first. And so if there's people who are disrupting that, I mean, as you saw with ESPN, people got fired. You see it with Marvel, there is a crackdown of what's being said. That's good news. It's good news that behavior is not alienating fans. So there's still something that goes on. Absolutely, there's still toxic things that get said. There's block bots that have been used that I'm very much opposed to. But it's time for everybody to level up a little bit and look at, what's wrong with editorial, what's wrong with the quality of the work that's going on, what's wrong with the distribution, what's wrong with why is continuity so hard at Marvel right now that titles just have no resemblance to each other, and it seems like nobody is talking. That hurts sales. It makes it very hard to have a customer come in and buy all new incredible Amadeus Cho Hulk, and then buy Champions, and the two titles have nothing to do with each other. The character is written differently, and it just seems very awkward. And if you're a reader, that's just telling you, I don't need to buy both of these, and maybe buy neither. That's the effect that is happening, and that's what we should be really focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and while we're talking about Marvel, what are your thoughts on CB Cebulski taking over? What is he, editor-in-chief, I think?
Yeah, it's it's a fan favorite move in the sense that he has a reputation for no drama, which is a little bit sad. I think Axel's parting shot on the way out to bring up the thing that everybody at Marvel knew about, which is he wrote under a pen name. But it's not like he's I don't know how much people expect CB to actually do. CB is not going to come in as a new person in a job with a line that's very much a subset of the Disney movie empire, which is right now what Disney cares about in terms of Marvel. And he's not going to come in and immediately start firing people and say, all right, no more social justice themes, we're going back to the basics. He would never do that. That'd be job suicide for him to do it. So he's going to come in, he's going to kind of establish his place. Being an executive at Disney is a good place to be. You get nice paycheck, nice stock. And, maybe he's going to make some changes, maybe he's not. More than anything, he's probably just going to try and cement himself as, a positive face that is not going to have the kind of media mishaps that Axel did. And that's probably what we can expect out of CB. People were assuming he was going to come in and just clean house. That was never going to happen. So, unfortunately for Marvel, I think there is a moment that comes when you look at the money that the movies are bringing in, and you look at that business, and then you look at Marvel as a publishing arm of Disney, and Disney already licenses out the majority of their publishing out of house. So the question a lot of these people have to be asking, I know several people inside Marvel are asking themselves this, is how long is Disney going to keep this in-house, and at what point do they just start farming it out and just licensing it? That's a model Disney's far more comfortable with. And I don't know how close that day is, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 years we're looking at that.
Yeah, I think they already. I've already started going to like a IDW to publish some of their Star Wars books and stuff. So,
yep.
Yeah. But
It's-
yeah,
I mean,
I
Marvel. I
agree.
mean, DC's already kind of doing that already. It wouldn't be that surprising.
Yep. No, it's far more profitable, and Warner Bros. Disney DC is a little tougher, it just in how they're structured, but Disney is absolutely structured to do it. They make their bread and butter on licensing, and so if this little arm over here, which really is insignificant in terms of the revenue that's coming into the company, if it gets to be too noisy, too problematic, or there's a feeling that well, put it this way, if Kevin Feige went up the chain and said, hey, the publishing division is not helping and it's actually hurting because it's not creating any kind of ground momentum for the movies. So the moment I've said is if there's a stumble, if there's a weak Marvel movie, something that actually does hurt, and I don't know when that will come. Captain Marvel's probably the big if right now. Not getting into spoilers with Avengers 3, but Captain Marvel's got some real hoops to jump through.
I agree, definitely.
Not just because of the character, but also the way it's been now set up in the Avengers. That's tough. That's the people who are doing that one have their work cut out for them. But if that stumbles and then that has a ripple effect of kind of Avengers 4 making less money than Avengers 3, then politics are politics. Will Fergie go up and say, "Hey, I'm getting screwed by this publishing arm. This got to end." Who do you think they're going to side with? I mean, that will be done real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to say, getting back to the Cebulski. I mean, I do agree that a lot of people, their expectations for him were way too high. He's not just going to come in and change everything overnight. But at the same time, I think there's maybe a bit more he could doing to start winning back fans' trust. It's little things like a new Avengers book. They're using the She-Hulk design that no one really liked. They're using the Tamaki design, and then stuff like you got Dan Slott, a heavily disliked writer on not just Iron Man, but he's writing the new Fantastic Four book too. I mean, I don't know. I know that. Okay, Darnell, go get your teddy. Get your teddy.
I don't have him here. He's at home.
Okay. Well, like I was saying, is like I know that Marvel doesn't have the biggest talent pool right now, but I think they could have found someone better than Dan Slott to write Fantastic Four, and then there's just a bunch of little things that I think that even if Cebulski, he's the new guy, he's not going to change everything overnight. But there are some things where I'm like, okay, how did this get through the cracks? I think he could have stepped in and done this a little better. So I'm kind of in the middle on him, and for that reason, I'm very skeptical about Marvel's future.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. By the way, I mean in the sense that he wasn't going to do anything. I hope for more. I think everybody hoped for more, but a corporate job with a nice salary and a bonus is hard to beat. But the big moment people I think are waiting to see is how much influence does CB actually have. He just, weeks ago in Chicago was talked about how there were, which a bunch of us sat there and heard that there were too many variants, and that it was hard on the ordering, it was hard on the distributors, hard on the shops when you've got 30 variant covers going out. That's an exaggeration, but a lot of variant covers going out, and everybody's nodding and agreeing. And CB's like, yeah, I don't like this either. This is no good. And David Gabriel in theory doesn't necessarily directly work for him, but definitely CB has some skill there. And then, a couple days later, the Iron Man variants came out for #1, and there's 20 odd copies. And so people are looking at this, and if he wants to win back some goodwill, and he needs to start making some statements like, we're not going to do 20 variants for one title. We're going to actually, Fantastic Four is going to come out, and we're going to make sure that one is a fan favorite team for a fan favorite team. And then deliver. He can't just say these things and then, here's the variant program again. He's got to actually be shown that he can make a difference.
I mean, because I was on a Facebook conversation about this, and one of the big things is like, someone was talking, well, it doesn't matter what the, the past mistakes were, because now everything's set back to normal, because now these characters are coming back. And I'm just, and in my head, that's just saying, no, that's like essentially saying, hey, I'm sorry I messed up. And I'm just using this example. I'm sorry I messed up the Star Trek timeline, but hey, here's Picard, so it's all back to normal now.
Right. Yeah. No, it's got to be a good story. It's got to be, So you look at the two, and I posted about this a couple weeks ago. Or last week, I think, you had Snyder taking over Justice League. You have Aaron taking over Avengers, and it will be an interesting time because, as I said, and Snyder was, I was shocked, but happy that he responded to me. It's not a competition. Snyder's view of it is we both want to put out great books, and all boats will rise. That's great. That's what we all want too. But you look at the tactic both are taking. Snyder's taking a tactic of very kind of high concept stuff. It's very much metal on steroids. It's a bunch of different teams, a bunch of random. It's off the wall, kind of zany. If he's partnered with great artists, Chung is a good start. Then he can pull it off. It will definitely bring a level of kind of crazy fun to the book with huge villains and huge stakes and everything else. So a lot of enthusiasm behind Justice League. Avengers, on the other hand, people definitely want to get back to the classic team. It is what they're seeing in the theaters right now, and they want that. McGinnis as the artist is not a bad start at all. That's good too. But the villains that they're lining up, kind of Dark Celestials, kind of a tie back to Aaron's legacy issue with the Avengers of 1 million BC. I think people. What I hear all the time is, when are we going to get the real big threats back? When are we going to have threatening Doctor Doom or threatening Magneto or threatening Red Skull or just these?
Or Galactus.
Or Galactus. It's just, where are the villains? And I harp on that, and people kind of like, I don't know. But you need a good threat, and the threat can't always be kind of faceless white mob who's racist and are going to get taught a lesson, which is half the time. Or random galaxy threat of something we've never heard of and we'll never hear from again.
Generic extraterrestrial threat number 10 million. I feel like every week there's some brand new random extraterrestrial threat every week.
Absolutely, and I think if I had the power to fix one thing at Marvel in particular right now, is fix their villain problem. We've got Ultron as a dinosaur and Squirrel Girl. You've got Galactus healing planets now. Doctor Doom is kind of ambiguous. It's not necessarily written terribly. Magneto's a mentor for the X-Men. I mean, you just go down the list, and there's, who's threatening. The Avengers storyline was supposed to be the one they just finished was going to have two mega evil teams, Masters of Evil and the Black Order, and about a third of the way through the series, both those bad guy teams are kind of dismissed as we got to see a little, battle of the Elders of the Universe over a title. I mean, you got the Black Order, who people are seeing in theaters just destroy planets and be very threatening. And in the comics, we're watching them kind of, trip and bumble and screw up and then kind of go out and have a beer on some faceless planet somewhere. That's not, you got to have threats. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I got a couple more questions before we wrap up. First of all, pretty much everyone in the comic industry is obsessed with new readers, getting new people into comics. Who do you think are the most viable demographics for new readers? Not just demographics, just what type of people do you think they should be chasing after in order to get into comics?
Kids and the movie audience. I think, and if there's one lesson to be learned from Scholastic actually being successful, it's that you've got a new generation who will go for comics. They like visual storytelling. They've in some cases been raised on Disney Junior and video games and other things. So visual storytelling will work for them, and they are ready to buy. And you've got guilty parents who aren't spending enough time with their kids who have money to buy them things. So that's an audience. You should go after that audience for sure.
Billy, mommy and daddy are getting a divorce, but we got you the Death of Captain America, so that should make up for it, right?
Exactly. We're having to work 80 hours because we're not making enough to afford it. But hey, here's the new coats, Captain America. So
but the thing with comics and kids, do you think that a lack of action in a lot of these comics targeted for kids is maybe hurting their appeal, hurting the amount of comics sold?
Yeah, 100%. You can't.
Yes, thank you.
100%. You cannot. You are insane if you. And this is you said it earlier very well. the young adult authors, some of the people they brought in, they're writing comics for themselves. They're not writing comics for their audience. And while it's nice that you want to have multiple pages of our superheroes discussing coffee because Joss Whedon made a funny moment of it in a movie, that's great. Kids like action. People want to see things happen. They can't have every issue be a conversation.
Yeah, and speaking anecdotally, I got into comics when I was around 8, and the comics I first read, I don't know if you remember these, they were called like Marvel Age and Marvel Adventures. They were basically like a retellings of like, you know, those like older stories from like the Silver Age, but with like, you know, modern writing and art. They were meant for kids, but they were superhero stories, okay? It was like, you know, superheroes, sometimes they just like, you know, sit around and talk or get coffee or something, but there was action. They were basically just they were like the mainstream comics. They were like the mainstream Marvel comics, but with a content level appropriate for kids. That's what got me hooked. That's what I think would get most kids hooked, but it's just not really what we're seeing right now. I think they're just too scared to show younger kids action stories, which is ironic because all these kids, they're going to watch the Marvel movies, which were regular action movies. So I'm thinking, what gives? Why are they wasting this huge opportunity?
And Matt, even I can compliment them at that, because the first comics I ever read were Brian Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man. Yes, those are very wordy, but they were also complement with Peter Parker jumping around, jumping on, you know, the villains' heads.
Sure. Man, I am super old. That's what I just realized in hearing what got you guys into comics. I'm fortunate. I'm more the you know, John Byrne was you know, taking over the Fantastic Four and working with Claremont and X-Men. So I'm back a little further, but no, you're right. It is, and okay, go and look at the titles being sold. Moon Girl does very well through Scholastic, and it is a popular title with kids. And there's a perception of what Moon Girl is, in that it's, you know, a lot of people have commented on what that title is all about. You open up the book, and you'll discover that, you know, yes, there's a kid, you know, main protagonist. There's a big dinosaur in there. They're having a remarkable amount of action compared to the fact that this girl is, you know, smart and into science and other things. The moments in the book are not, you know, Galactus is eating the planet, but they're definitely more action based. You put it side by side with a Hawkeye, with America, with some of these other titles. There's a reason why Moon Girl is successful, and it is what you're saying. There's an effort to put actual things happening in the book that appeal to kids, and it does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you turn every book into Moon Girl by any stretch of the imagination, but it's weird how there's lessons that come out where it seems like some comic artists, authors, the writers, they really want to create the new Scott Pilgrim, which is fine, but Scott Pilgrim was what it was, and that's not what second, third graders are going to read ever. They're going to read, you know, just as Bendis before he got out of control with his writing of Spider-Man hopping around and having action, or, you know, retelling of these classic adventures with an art polish on it. I mean, that's what kids want to read, and then they will. And there's a big market there if people get it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think it's very frustrating that they're still failing to tap that market, even though it would be so easy to do it, because it's like making these books for kids. They aren't bound by they don't have as many of the continuity problems, or like the having to, like, you know, keep like the mainstream Marvel books. They have to keep, like, you know, 50 or 60 titles editorially consistent. Like, you know, more kid-friendly stuff, it could be in its own universe. We wouldn't have those problems. It would be very easy to make a line of successful books targeted towards younger readers. Same with DC, but I think it really sucks that we're not seeing that happen.
All
but
right. Matt, you know what we need to do now, right? We need to talk comics out of the back advance with candy.
Yeah, just paid free comics in a van and just troll the elementary schools. That is a solid plan. We'll try it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing could possibly go wrong with that plan.
Yeah. Last topic I have is what are your guys' expectations for the future of comics? I guess the next 10 years or so. Do you think things are going to improve or stay the same? Just what are your hopes? Not hopes. What are your predictions for the industry?
I think that well, I made a couple already. I do believe that you'll see a couple big plays in comics. I think you will see. I think we're seeing a preview of what Amazon's battle against Marvel and DC looks like, and what they've been doing with Comixology and pricing. I think that you're seeing a little bit of power struggle there. I think that will have an impact with comics and how they're sold and how they're distributed. We're getting some clues about that. I do think at some point, and people say I'm crazy, that Disney will eventually just shuffle Marvel off as a licensed publishing arm and not keep it in house. I think that we're in for kind of another, not purge, but big turnover in creators. I think if some of these moments happen, if the pricing changes, if Marvel does ship out, if DC starts to actually feel like they can take the number one spot and hold it, then I think you will see eventually somebody will kind of turn around and realize that they could fire half the editorial, give the regular staff doubling of their salary, and probably get better results. And I think you'll start to see some real kind of seismic firings and shiftings in the industry.
Mr. Johns, is it time for the red wedding yet?
Yes, exactly. It is time for the red wedding in some of these companies for sure. And I think we'll see a bad year for stores this year. A lot of people in this area are wondering. We're all looking at each other going, this area can probably support 10. There's 20 shops here, so some people are going to have to go. Who's it going to be? And none of us like that idea. But toward the end of the year, I would love to see Captain Marvel as a movie work for a lot of reasons. I'd like the gravy train to keep rolling because there is a benefit to me as a shop owner. I'd like to see somebody actually come in and make Captain Marvel work as a character, and there'd be some irony if it wasn't the comic guys, it was actually the movie people who figured it out. I think I'd love to see that happen. I do, though, think that Captain Marvel is going to stumble because it's set up with what happened in Avengers 3. It's set up to be a big movie. There's a lot of expectations of that Captain Marvel is going to be Disney's Wonder Woman, and it won't be. That lightning won't strike twice in the same way. I hope I'm wrong, but
don't worry. Samuel Jackson will save the day once again.
That's a good move, having him in it. He will bring some charisma to the title.
Him and Coulson. I'm almost willing to see it just for those two.
Yeah. No, there's some good stuff there for sure.
He will lay his vengeance upon thee. And we will know that his name is the Lord.
Die, scroll, die!
I am hoping. I think that I think for what separates me a little bit from, or what separates kind of the true comic fans, people want to make it better, and the people who just want to bitch is. It's you want these things to succeed. I want Captain Marvel to succeed. I think there are big risks. We should talk about them. We should try and help if there's ways we can help. But at the end of the day, I want these things to succeed. I want all this stuff. I want mags to sell huge in shops. I do, because I make money off of it. I want these things to go. I want these new audiences that people have been chasing around social justice to suddenly wake up one day, decide they love comics, and come into my shop and start buying. That would be awesome. Let's have all that stuff happen. But very little of it will, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, I guess my expectations. I think things are going to keep sucking for a while longer. That's just common sense. In fact, I doubt anyone will dispute that, because the thing is, when you look at it, no one's really satisfied with comics right now. Not the social justice crowd, not guys like us. Pretty much all of us have a mountain of complaints. It's like the social justice people. They're really pissed about Marvel's fresh start. They're like, Laura Kinney isn't Wolverine anymore. Sam Wilson isn't Cap anymore. And does he even have his own book anymore, Sam Wilson?
No, that got canceled.
Okay, he doesn't have books anymore. It's like we don't like fresh start either for our own reasons, but it's just like no one's really happy with comics at the moment, and I think that really sucks. And I think that everyone knows that things are going to keep sucking for a while. But after that, I really don't know. I mean, I want things to improve, because if I lost the ability to enjoy this hobby at all, if I lost this hobby completely, that would really suck for me. But honestly, I don't know. Things could get better 5 or 10 years from now, or they could be worse, or the industry as we know it could be dead. So I guess I don't really have an answer in that regard.
I think take heart in this sense, and it's not going to die. It will definitely change. I think there's some shop owners who are surviving, and God, this is awful to say that, but really shouldn't have. They were surviving, like a lot of store owners. If they didn't have a good business, they don't have a good business. I think comics will continue on. It's just it will be in a different state. Digital's not going to take over. So there's still going to be floppies. There's still going to be trades. There's still going to be things. You will see more diversification where you've got, titles being written for young adult audiences that are actually appropriate for that audience and
they're actually good.
Yeah, and they're good. Well, or at least if you don't like them, you can pick it up and go, yeah, okay, well, somebody clearly cared about this thing and it's meeting a market. So, I mean, we don't all have to like everything, but you want the stuff you don't like to at least be not hurting the industry. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the moments, I'm just hoping that they'll, I guess, throw me a carrot. They can at least give me a Wally West solo book for now to tide me over until things as a whole can improve. But right now, I got very low expectations.
He's really reaching for that 50 Shades of West.
No, don't you mean 50 Shades of Grayson?
Grayson. Very nice.
Okay. So, you guys have any final thoughts? Anything else you want to throw out before we wrap up?
No, I'm just thank you for setting it up. It was a pleasure talking to both of you.
No problem. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if that's it, I think it's time for us to finish the stream. I think that was a really good stream, one of my favorites actually. So thanks to both of you guys for appearing. Thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Good night, everybody.
Good night.